In 1968, Robert Patrick Rocky Bleier was drafted into the United States Army after having played only 10 games as a running back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. On August 20th of 1969, Rocky, who had volunteered to serve in Vietnam, was severely wounded, having been shot in the leg and had his right foot shredded by an exploding enemy hand grenade. Rocky spent months in the hospital in Tokyo, Japan, where he was told that he would never play pro football again. However, while in rehab, he received a postcard from Art Rooney that simply said, "Rocky, the team is not doing so well. We need you." It was at that point that Rocky decided that he was not only going to play pro football again, but that he was going to be better than he ever had been before. And so he rejoined the Steelers in 1971 as Franco Harris's blocking fullback and played on 4 Super Bowl winning teams during 10 seasons with the team of the 70s, the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, it is not just these accomplishments that this decorated United States Army veteran wishes to be noted for. It is his passion to aid veterans and their families that led to the formation of RB Vetco Construction Company and his spearheading of many organizations which helped to create opportunities for all of Americans' veteran-owned businesses. Recently, we at the Veterans Channel had an opportunity to speak with our guy, Pittsburgh's own Rocky Bleier.
You know, as one looks back and reflects on one's past and history and what took place, and try to put it in perspective, you know, and to be a part of, you look back and you're a part of something that was created, something that was new, something that made a difference here in Pittsburgh, given the history of the Steelers and where they were and what had taken place over the first 40 years of that existence. And then all of a sudden being able for that team to turn around in not only in leadership. Chuck Noll came on board, Dan Rooney took over as president of the club, but then the draft choices, the input, the building of the team, trying to change an image, and it took time. And then all of a sudden, you know, you start to win, and there's a synergism that takes place, and you can't explain it. And all of a sudden, you know, you get to the first Super Bowl. We got the Immaculate Reception, first of all, in 1972, of course. You got to remember that, because that kind of set a tone. It was like we won the game with that deflected pass, where in years past, we would have lost the game or never be there to begin with. But all of a sudden, it kind of changed. And so there was a belief system that kind of changed as well. And now all of a sudden, we became proud of what we're trying to get accomplished. So going back during that period of time, as a player, it's isolated. You know, because you go, oh, okay, what happened? Oh, wow, that was a lucky play. And all of a sudden, we get to the playoffs and we lose to Miami eventually in the following week in the championship game, and they go on to the Super Bowl. But it was a start. So we come back in '73, make a mark, but it's 1974. Things change. We overcome a lot of obstacles, and people may not remember that. But in 1974, there was a player strike. We had 14 new guys make the team as rookies. Terry Bradshaw sitting on the bench. Joe Gillum is the starting quarterback. Franco got hurt in the first game, so he's banged up and he's not playing. And we kind of get off to a shaky 3-1-1 start. And then all of a sudden, you know, things have to start to coalesce and come together. And in the remaining games, and all of a sudden Bradshaw comes back and we start to make a difference, and we start to win, and of course then we go to the Super Bowl. And so you go to the Super Bowl. Wow. I mean, it's the Super Bowl, and it's young. it's not 55 years. I mean, it's Super Bowl 9 out of the history. And so now you get a chance to go and you get into that singular game. I think one of the things that continues for us is a philosophy of Chuck, is that no one game is more important than the other game. Super Bowl, don't blow it out of perspective. You had to play, 16 games to be able to get there to begin with. And so this is just another game in the series of games. You've proven what you've done in the past. And so let's go and, play the game. And so he prepared like every week. Nothing extraordinary, but I think that kind of mindset was a basis for the success of the team in the 70s. And so just to be a part of that, and that's the thing, just to be a part of it is something that you will have, or I as a player will have for the rest of my life, because of my teammates, because of leadership, because of being at the right place, right time, and just being a part of it. So that is that's what I take away from that whole experience of playing for the Steelers through the 70s.
Tell us, our viewers, what it was like in the locker room, the celebration after the Super Bowl.
So obviously we didn't know there was going to be 4 Super Bowls, and I can remember the first one. More importantly, it was obviously down in Tulane Stadium, down in New Orleans. We're playing the Minnesota Vikings, and the game's ticking off towards the end of the game, and the defense is on the line, and we have a lead. We're going to win this game. And so my thought process is this. All right, I don't want to get intermingled with all the fans on the field. As we see today on television at Super Bowls, the guys are hanging around and fans are coming up. No, my thought process was, let's get off the field. So as the defense is winding the clock down, I'm inching my way towards the end of the sideline towards our where we had to go in towards our locker room. So when that gun went off, I went towards the locker room. A couple guys were right behind me. And so I got to the locker room, and I walked into the locker room, and there was Mr. Rooney standing all by himself. And he had just walked away from the door and was turning around when I walked in. And it was my opportunity to go over, and I got the first hug from Mr. Rooney, and he said, "Thank you." And I'll never forget that. So the locker room, then guys came in, of course, and unlike what we see today, it was, was pretty cool. It wasn't as maybe, it was joyous, but we didn't have all the champagne that was going on, and so, but guys were coming in, and we won the Super Bowl, and of course, the first thing we did was get down on our knees and say a prayer as a team in thanksgiving for what had taken place, and then we got to shake hands and thank everybody, and we're Super Bowl champions, and Pete Rozelle came in and being able to give Mr. Rooney the trophy in the locker room at that time. And so it was more, I guess maybe from my point of view, it was more private and more introspective than as you see today outside on, in front of thousands of people, and it's all right for the celebration, but it was just a little different at that time, and something I think my teammates and I will always remember, maybe that first Super Bowl. And then each one had its own impact thereafter.
Great, fantastic. Okay, now let's go back a little bit. You were drafted before the first Super Bowl into the Army.
Right.
And you went to Vietnam. That would have blown my mind. What went through your mind when you got that notice that you were drafted?
You know, so, and I think one of the things is that we have to put the viewer in perspective, the viewer who's watching this interview, and take them back to 1960s, to 1968. So obviously the Vietnam War was there. It started to escalate. Actually, there was activity in 63 and 64, and then started to escalate, you know, in 66, 67, 68, when we were in college. And I was in college at the time. And so I had some of my high school teammates, you know, be drafted before that, dropped out of school, and, you know, were kind of gone piecemeal-wise. So on one side, there was this war that was going on, maybe didn't escalate, although there was a lot of controversy, student movements that were taking place, protests that were happening on one hand. But on the other hand, you're in college trying to concentrate on playing football and get through that part of your life, whatever that meant. And Vietnam was around you, but not really first thing on your mind. And so the first thing that was on my mind was the NFL draft during your senior year. And so we had won the national championship after the 66 season, and I was a captain of the team in the 67 season. I was graduating in June of, or May, I should say, of 68. So, and the draft was early. Draft was in February of that time. And so it was a 3-day draft, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, obviously, the first 4 or 5 rounds. Now you have to understand there were 17 rounds, not like today, which is only 7 rounds, but there were 17 rounds. And the only way you could become a property was being drafted. There was very few free agents as we have today. But so we're waiting around, and so Friday came. And in all honesty, my perspective of being drafted wasn't high. I didn't think I was going to be in the top 5 rounds, or, you know, be done on Friday. And Saturday came, and so I wasn't drafted. And then Sunday came. Part of the reason was that in my senior year, the second to the last game, I had partially torn a ligament in my knee, and so I had it operated on. So that becomes a question mark, you know, that they don't know what the status is or how long or how bad that knee was. Unlike today, they would know everything about the player, but not so much at that time. So all of a sudden it was Sunday evening, and the news came on, and in the evening, and so the sports came on, and it said, oh, today, in today's NFL draft, several players from the South Bend area were selected in the NFL. So-and-so from Purdue went, and then so-and-so from Indiana State went, and Notre Dame's captain, Bob Rocky Bleier, was drafted number 16th by the Pittsburgh Steelers. There was a pause. My friend said, hey, congratulations. Anyway, and the discussion was like, what are we going to do next week? How's school? You know, let's go so and so. Anyway, that's how I got drafted. So when I came to Pittsburgh, my expectations, you know, were hopefully just to make the team. And so I packed everything I could, or all my belongings, because if I didn't make the team, because that possibility arose, I was going to go to Florida. I was heading to Florida. Why? I don't know. Well, I was going to go to Florida. I took my golf clubs, you know, and I thought, okay, I'll spend a couple weeks, whatever. So the season came, or I should say, the training camp came, and ultimately I made the team. I was one of 4 rookies that made the team as a 16th round draft choice in 1968. And so that became the focus. I wasn't thinking about Vietnam. I wasn't thinking about joining the reserve or something, because somewhere in my mind, part of my naivety was that, well, if the Steelers draft you, they'll take care of you. NFL teams, I came from Wisconsin, Green Bay Packers, we're in the Army Reserve or the National Guard to take care of that responsibility of being in the service. And so I just thought, well, if I make the team, that's what was going to happen. But to put it in perspective, 1968 was the height of the war. We had 500,000 troops over there. Everybody who had any brains were already in the reserve and the National Guard. So when asked by the Steelers, what's happening in that movement, and they said, well, the same old excuses. The congressman got defeated, and the general retired, and we don't know anybody to get you in, and it's full, and kind of a stuff. But don't worry, we're working on it. And so during that period of we're working on it, I had changed my draft board from Wisconsin to Pittsburgh to buy me some time, and them to be able to get me in the reserve. And so all of a sudden, the games are going on, and I think it's the 11th game of the season. We're playing 14 games right before the 11th season. So we're at Pitt Stadium, and we're getting ready for practice. So all of a sudden, one of the equipment guys holler, "Hey, Bleier, there's a letter over here for you." And the letter, it was on the table where all the fan mail would be deposited for the players. And so I went and picked it up and unfolded it, and it said, "Greetings. We'd like to inform you that you've been inducted into the armed services." I'm going, oh my goodness gracious. To report the next morning at 7 a.m. I said, don't they have to give you some time? I thought to myself, don't they have to give you like a week or so to get your stuff together? And so anyway, I showed up the next morning, tried to plead my case as best possibility. They gave me 24 hours to get my stuff together, and I was off to basic training at that period of time. So how do you react? Well, I think the only thing is you have to react to the situation. It's kind of in a blur, but all of a sudden you become on automatic, let us just say. You don't have time to question, this or that, or, you try to make as best decisions. I got to call my parents. Somebody's got to come up and pick my car up, get rid of, I got to pay bills. I got to do this and get that wrapped up because I'm leaving. And so I pack a suitcase as they tell me to go, and all of a sudden, boom, you're gone. So I go to basic, and I go to advanced infantry training, as most recruits did. And so I got my MOS, 11 Bravo, which is an infantry guy. And then got my orders to report to Vietnam. Had 2 weeks to fly home, said hi, goodbye to my folks, and then went to San Francisco, boarded a plane, flew over the Pacific, and of course landed, like thousands of other young men, into Vietnam. And then all of a sudden that became my world. So it was kind of interesting at the time is that you just focused on every day. You just focused on the task ahead of you, what needed to be done. You didn't have time to worry about, what's going to happen to me. You just try to get through that morning, that afternoon, then the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, and do your job the best possibly you can, especially when you're in Vietnam, to just say, hopefully, I can get out of here alive and get back to the real world, as they say. So that was kind of my mental attitude, at that time. And so you had a routine as an infantry troop, and we had an area of operation in which we had to operate, and we worked off of landing zones where were mountains, and so we would pull security guard up around the the heavy guns that were up there, the 155s, that would cover our area. And so then we would be down into the valley for 10 days, 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, and we just rotate around. And so about 4 months in country, then there was a push, unbeknownst to us. This wasn't until later did I find out. There was a push from the North Vietnamese to come down into our area of operation. And so they had a regiment that would trickle down from north of Vietnam down the pathway and collect down into our area. So intelligence gave us that information. And so there was a pincher movement by the Marines that were north of us, and we were a retaining force. They were to push the enemy into us, and whatever was going to happen, I guess. And so basically on the day that we had got into the action, we were up on LZ West, which is one of the landing zones. Sister company was in the field. Got hit in a firefight with the intruding North Vietnamese soldiers. And we were to fly out, and which we did eventually, to help give them support. By the time we got to them late at night, most of the fighting had been done with them. Our mission was now to get them out of that hot spot. We did pull front and rear security. On our way out, we ran into another firefight late at night, and the word was to leave the bodies that we were carrying out behind. We'll come back and pick them up when we can in a couple days, whatever. That was kind of the overall view. So 2 days later, our company that I was a part of, was in the process of going back to get a secured area, to retrieve those dead, getting helicopters come in and extract them. In so doing, we walked across a open rice paddy, and we ran into some enemy activity. We ran into a firefight, and all of a sudden we're out in the open. Machine gun opened covered the area. We were diving into the rice paddies left and right. I jumped in the one in front of me, crawled on my hands and knees, found another one lying below us. 4 guys were pinned down out in the open. Now, my responsibility was that I carried an M79 grenade launcher, and I was the only grenadier within the company, so my responsibility was to get some firepower quickly onto that machine gun nest, which was maybe about 150 meters away, maybe a couple hundred up on the hillside. So I could see where it was, and I rolled over and I breached my grenade when I felt a thud in my left leg, and I got hit for the first time that day. Discharged that round, dropped back behind some protection. We got enough fire. We got enough firepower onto that machine gun, so the 4 guys who were pinned down got out of there, and they retreated, and we drew back and set up another defensive position. They probed our perimeter, got close enough, when all of a sudden I see a grenade come flying in, and it was an old Chi-Com grenade. It's got a handle on it, a bob on the top, and it's going over and over and over, and it hits my commanding officer right in the middle of the back. I can see it, and it bounces off of him and rolls towards where I am, and I jumped to get out of the way, and as I did, I was standing on top of it, and it blew up to my right foot, knee, and thigh, and again we're in another firefight. Till the sister platoon fought its way down and dragged us out of there. So they finally get us out of there. For whatever reason, they retreated. So I don't know whether we we wounded or killed their commanding officer or whatever it was, but all of a sudden they retreated. And so now the sister company is pulling us out of there, and they're pulling me out. And I can remember I'm sitting there, and the first soldier comes, who I knew briefly from this other platoon, and he comes running in, and he slides right next to me, and he goes, "You all right? You all right?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Oh, good." He said, "Because we heard you and the captain bought it." I said, "I'm glad you're alive. Okay, we'll get you out of here. Don't you worry. You be the first to get out of here. I'll carry out it myself." And I go, "Oh, okay, fine." And then he comes back and he goes, "I'm sorry, the captain's the first one that's going out. You can be second." I said, "Okay, fine." So they have to carry me out, and they're carrying me out on a poncho liner. I can't walk, so they got 4 guys. Now, they're dragging me. They each got a corner. They got their weapon. They got their ammunition. And, they got a guy that's 170 pounds of dead meat that they're dragging. Now, they've been up in as long as we had. They had their own firefight, fighting their way to get down to us. And they finally, so they're beat to begin with. They're dragging me throughout the evening. And they finally get to a point where they just can't drag me anymore. And they go, "Don't worry, we're going to we'll send something back. We'll get a stretcher and we'll send it back to you. We'll take care of you." So I'm going, "Oh, okay, fine." All of a sudden, my adrenaline wears off. Now all the pain starts, and so an interesting thing that took place, and maybe this gives the quality of what happens within combat, and maybe the brotherhood of combat. All of a sudden, out of the darkness, 2 hands reach down, scoops me up. And the soldier picks me up and he throws me over his shoulder. Now, the soldier is an African American. And what doesn't make a difference, but yet at that time, and let's go back in time, in the 60s, and just the civil rights movement was going on. That whole movement was taking place. But at a moment in time, no one cares about color of skin, where you're from, where you're born. You're brothers within an armed forces. And he picks me up and he carries me all the way to the helicopter. He puts me down, catches his breath, doesn't say a word. I got blood all over him, picks me up again and continues all the way. And he puts me, and eventually gets me to the helicopter and goes in. And I didn't know who he was, or where he came from, or his name, or where he is today. But at that moment in time, there was that brotherhood of war that came together in time of need. So I share that because all that's going on now, even after these 50 years, and it hasn't changed, but it's really about humanity. And unfortunately, maybe it takes a situation like a combat emergency to understand the need of individuals and human beings with one another. So anyway, so they got me there to a helicopter, went to an aid station where I got patched up, and then ultimately flew to Tokyo, where I spent 3 weeks in the hospital before I came back to the States, and where I spent 9 months in the hospital. I went through 3 operations during that period of time. So anyway, so I met the aid station. Now I'm in the hospital before we go to Tokyo. And so we're waiting for transportation by the time to get you. And anyway, so in the time of need, in time of conflict, we as individuals, no matter what we do, we start to question, now what's going to happen to us? So I had an IV running in and out of my body, morphine drip to take the pain away, and all those thoughts of now what, where's my future, what's going to happen, why me, goes floating through our minds. I don't care who we are or where we came from at a time of need or injury or conflict in this way. And across from me was a young soldier who was a triple amputee, lost his left arm and both legs. And every day I was there, and I have to tell you this, I was only there for maybe 2 or 3 days, but what I had seen every day that I was there, the aides would come to take him to therapy. And as best as he possibly could, he'd grab that little trapeze that swung over his bed, swing his torso in, and they'd get him into a wheelchair, and they would push him to therapy. But he made sure that he stopped at every bed in the ward on his way out. And he stopped at my bed. And he said to me, he said, "Hey, how you doing? I tell you what, you look better today than you did yesterday when you got here. Because let me tell you in all honesty, you look like shit, okay? I mean, we got some great docs here going to take care of you, and you'll get out of here, and I'll see you back in the real world one of these days." And my thought process was, wow, really, think about it. If anybody could be embittered with their lot in life, it would be that young soldier, having lived with those atrocities that took place thousands of miles away, but yet he made a difference. He had a positive attitude, and I thought, wow, if he could have an attitude like that, what about me? I'm going to be able to walk someday. So it made a difference, and it's really kind of a lesson learned. It was an impact that people have in your lives, no matter where they come from, that can help change. So I always tell veterans specifically, your story, I don't care what it is, your story makes a difference. Whether it be peacetime, during war, you didn't have to be a foot soldier, you could be in personnel, or we all have stories that need to be changed. And you never know when those stories may change the attitude of somebody else at that time in their need of either a laugh or a thought. And so they become very important. And so it was, so that was a difference that, that he made. So I got to Tokyo, and you talk about people that make a difference. And so, as I had mentioned, I got to Tokyo. And after a couple weeks in Tokyo, I finally got enough courage to ask my physician what he thought that if I could come back and play this game with the injuries from his perspective. And so his response to me was somewhat of a polite chuckle, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You're going to have a normal life. You're going to be able to do what normal people do. Just don't expect to get back on the football field because you just might not have the strength or the flexibility to do the things that are necessary to be a running back in the NFL." And for what he had thought about as my authority figure, as my authority figure, he just sucked that hope right out. Correct or not, in his diagnosis, correct or not, but he just kind of sucked that hope right out. 2 days later, true story, I got a postcard in the mail, and it had 2 lines on it. And the postcard said, "Rock, team's not doing well. We need you. Art Rooney." Wow. Somebody needed me. Well, they didn't really need me, okay? But somebody took the time to care. And again, it's a reflection on the impact that we can make in people's lives, given the experience that we've had and what a difference it can make. You never know when you have a smile, it could change somebody's attitude. When you say hi to somebody who maybe nobody has talked to, or you give a helping hand. It's just those little things that make difference in people's lives. And here's a postcard that made a difference. And that was a kind of a family that they were. And they gave me an opportunity, because I think that's all we could ever ask for. But it's what you do with the opportunity, so you have to work hard, and you got to come back and be able to try to make the team again. And eventually I got that opportunity. And I can remember, although I don't have that postcard, I do have a postcard that or a letter I sent to Mr. Rooney, and asking him whether I could be invited to have a tryout when I got back out of the service. And he said, well, I'll talk to Dan, and I'm sure we can make that possible. So they gave me the opportunity.
I have to ask you this question because it's happened to me and it's happened to a lot of veterans, but have you ever been approached by someone who voiced their displeasure about you being a Vietnam veteran, and what was your response?
You know, I should say, in all honesty, throughout all these years of one having served and then thereafter, and is that no one ever questioned why I was a soldier. No one ever came from the perspective of well, it was a bad war to begin with, and you were a part of it, and so because of that, I don't agree with you, or I disrespect you, or whatever. No, I very fortunately, and I have not. Maybe it's because part of the story, and so on, or people became aware of what actually had taken place in Vietnam and why we're there. And it wasn't so much the conflict, and it shouldn't be taken out on the soldier. I mean, the soldier was just doing his job and his responsibility. He got drafted, and he was just, it was a period of time. You can be against the war, you can be against why we're there policy-wise, but don't take it out on the soldier, because he was just doing his job. And he was defending his country, and whether you agree with it or not, he was fulfilling his responsibility in being a part of this great country. So I never really got any negative feedback in that regards.
You were named the Grand Marshal for the 2021 Military Appreciation Day Parade in Myrtle Beach. How did that come about?
That's right. It's the same way. Would you like to do an interview? Can I get your number? Would you do an interview? I know. I think it came about in similar regards of that we'd love to have you as a Grand Marshal. And I think it would benefit our veterans and to have a person of maybe your name or stature to come and be our Grand Marshal. So it's a great tribute, and I'm looking forward to that.
Robbie, you're much too. That's not true. They recognize you as being a good guy, and you represent us well, man.
Right.
You're our guy, and they realize that. They see that in you down there, even though they're
That's
beach,
right.
They see that in you, man.
Okay.
Believe me, everyone sees that in you.
Thanks.
Okay, you are our guy. You're our guy. Okay, so tell us about your construction company. How was it formed? When did you form that?
So it was an interesting development and I'm going to go back to 1999, and it's not so much we didn't start, and I wasn't a part of this at all. Or 1999, 98, there were veterans that were. Wanted to get part of the government contracts. How do we become part of a minority chain within the federal, government? And so it started on the West Coast specifically, and they start within the state of California, and go through the process of trying to be recognized as an entity that they could have. For federal governments. They had already established 8As, which is a minority status for people. They established Hub Zone, which is a what can I say? a city area that is struggling, financially, that needs support and would like to have businesses there. So there's a hub zone, women-owned, 8A, and so women-owned as well became part of that faction. And then 8A, that had existed. So the veteran was saying, hey, what about veterans? I mean, we fought for this country. How about us having a place at the table? Well, like everything else, and it was through negotiations and so on and so on. And so then it became service disabled, veteran-owned, small business entity to be able to file. So that was in 2004. And so we thought it was an opportunity, because that's all we have are opportunities to be able to get a foot at the door. And so we established the construction company at that time. And so although it was an ideal, it was a goal by the federal government and those in politics and in Washington, D.C. said, oh, we would love to have it, but a trickle-down effect into who was actually going to administer it took a long time, so they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know what to do. How do we get contracts out? Who's going to vie for what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So eventually it evolved because of veteran interests and veteran support and groups around the country, that it isolated into the VA. Well, at least let us do the veteran administration work at the VA hospitals, because that's us. I mean, that's our guys that are in there. We were the ones that fought for this war. We made a decision to become part of our armed services and lived up to that responsibility. We weren't, it wasn't a matter of ethnic. So we got different ethnic backgrounds. We were born male. Well, it wasn't the fact that we were born female, but we were military. So we got both male, female, within this confines. And so eventually, I'm just saying eventually, that's how it morphed. So we started in 2004, very small, and really had to go through growing pains as the program expanded and developed. So we've been doing that, since, and so we've come all these years later, and so we're in a small business, and we bid work within the VA system when that comes out, and fought for that right to be able to do so, and so it's been good, and so we've built the business up, and I got a lot of mouths to feed, and so it keeps me driving, and it keeps us going, and get some great people. Basically, it's like everything else. You're only as good as the people that you have. You're only as good as a unit. And you can be a leader, but if you don't have the people to be able to follow you or do the job and know their job, so that has been very rewarding in that regards. But that's that's how we got into it. It was somewhat by accident. I'm not an engineer. I didn't come up in the construction family, but it was an opportunity that existed, and we thought that it might be something worthwhile to get in and be able to do some good work. And part of it is a continuing education. So, ultimately, with a role that I get to play in because of the Super Bowls and because of being a veteran, and then also being a business owner, is the chance to give people the opportunity to become as the best they can become or what they want to do, military. And so we work with the unions and we help, people, or from an educational point of view, military personnel who want to make transitions, because transitions are difficult. I mean, coming out of the service, no matter what it may be, whether you spent a 20-year career or you spend 10 years or whether you spend 4 years, you make a transition. And sometimes those transitions are difficult. But what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? How do I do this? My only thing is I'm getting out. I'm not listening to another word that the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps are telling me. I just want my DD-214, and I don't know about my benefits. That's okay. I'll catch up later on. But there's so many opportunities out there that that are available. So part of that responsibility within this industry is to educate those veterans that may want to make the transition into the construction industry, and how can they use the talents that they had maybe within the service and transfer into this industry. Over the years, we've done a lot of projects over at the VA, especially in this visit and around here. But this one specifically, we got an award for, and that was a design build. And what we had to do was put a fifth floor on a three-story building. And so the fourth floor did not exist, and so we had to be able to tie it in to another building, which was then created the fifth floor. So we in the design itself is that rather than building up, we built the fifth floor extension to meet the fifth floor of the neighboring building, but then we had to hang everything down from the top of the fifth floor rather than building up from the third floor. So there's this space in between in which we put all the air conditioning and all the units in the kind of fourth floor. It really wasn't fourth floor, but so anyway. So the design and the technique is that we get nominated, and we got an award for the design and then the building of that building at the VA.
Beautiful. Okay, now you're a member of several foundations. What is Beating the Odds Foundation?
Beating the Odds Foundation is actually a foundation out of Altoona. And Rocco Scalzi heads that foundation. And Beating the Odds Foundation is for children in school, to give them the opportunity to reach their potential. Basically, there is a whole program that was written by the Secretary of Education for the state of Wisconsin to implement into diversity and those programs for kids to be able to reach their potential. So we all have to overcome odds, and so we're all trying to beat the odds, no matter what we do in our lives, where we come from, and so on. But we want to be able to give underprivileged kids that are struggling, the opportunity to see what else is out there. So we have Quarterbacks of Life, which is a program that interacts within the school itself, and where people take charge and become a quarterback, and help run to give other kids. And so then we intermingle with businesses and around the country. So we have a relationship with NASA, okay? And so we do a program with NASA with kids in in this program, and they have to, and so it'll be a specific set by NASA of interest. So they become involved. They have to write a paper, put on a program about, and working with NASA, and then they go and travel to the headquarters of NASA and be able to present their paper and just, and so the whole idea is giving them an opportunity to be involved in things that they may never have thought about. And we've had people or students, come back and gone into engineering because they thought this was the coolest thing in the world that they've experienced, and it piqued their interest, and they would have never thought about it. But anyway, so it's kind of that program that we have on a national basis within school districts itself. And we also have the same program that goes on into in the prison system as well, and beating the odds, and that's overcoming and making transitions coming out of our prison system. And so how do you make that transition? You're back on the streets again without any goals, and so we help set those goals and hold hands and provide hopefully jobs, and direction with counseling as once they make that transition coming out. So Rocco does a wonderful job in Beating the Odds Foundation. Okay, so NAVOBA is an opportunity or a clearinghouse for veteran-owned businesses. Okay, to do business with veteran-owned businesses, business to business, and become a platform. So whatever, not that you have to be a minority business or an 8A or something, just you're a veteran and you've got a business, whatever it might be, a restaurant or whatever it is. But here is an association that allows you to come in touch with other veteran-owned businesses. And so as a coalition, you might be able to, depending on where your, what business it may be, to use it as a gathering point for product or questions or problems. And so you get peers that you get a support mechanism from. And so they do a wonderful job. And that is established here in Pittsburgh. And it's a national program. Warriors to Citizens is really a hands-on program for service personnel, for first responders, to understand. So from a military point of view, and especially in today, in the last 20 years, that we've been in the Middle East, and we have an all-volunteer army. So which actually means that from a reserve or even a National Guard or regular army, is that you are on a rotation sense. So you've been, very seldom is there one deployment. There's usually 2 or 3 or 4. And what you have to understand about the deployment is that all of a sudden you find yourself, in a whole different world, and it's not necessarily being in combat or on the front line, but it's just being away. So you got a family that's back here, and you're part of the military. But think about the immediate communication that we have today. I can pick up a cell phone. I might be in Afghanistan. I can pick up a cell phone and talk to my wife, or she can as well. Not that it happens that often, but it's so much easier, to get in touch. So all of a sudden, you got 2 feet in each world. Now you got one back here. Problems arise. You got kids that are being here, so on and so on and so on. But then you got your responsibility over here. There's a war going on, and this is what you have to do. So you're pulled in different directions. So you go through that several times, plus the separation. plus your experience within that realm of whatever you're doing in the Middle East or where you are deployed to. It takes its toll statistically. It is that divorce rates go up, separations go up, and suicide rates go up. And so what is needed is transitionals. Okay. Also, mindset of military people. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm a tough guy. I get through this. I don't want to talk about it. It's none of your business. And I can't let my commanding officer understand how I may feel. No. So all that stuff is repressed. The impact then is really the family. The impact, if I come back, when I come back, and how do I make that transition? So because of the divorce rates that continuously go up after 2 deployments or 3 deployments, because of the suicide rates, and especially during this time of COVID, and isolation that had taken place had expanded. And what does that do with the family? You might feel depressed. But how does that affect a family? So what we try to do is be able to bring those sets together and give them the counseling they need, the immediate counseling they need, the follow-up counseling, the ability to Zoom, FaceTime, immediate contact to help get through that period of time. Then we got programs for kids as well to be able to handle those situations in case there is a suicide or death that takes place. How do they feel? How do they handle that? So it's those transitions that become very important. Now it also then expands, into all aspects of life. One of the things that we're working on now is healthy truck drivers. So depending on your statistics, there's probably, just as a general, 30% of our truck drivers are military personnel, that makes the transition. So, and it's a horrible statistics of what we get from a diabetic point of view, from heart disease, and on truck drivers. And how safe are our highways, because of that. And so we're trying to, help put things in perspective as well so that people can get help. And then also, just get out the word about what's available within the VA system, and within the government. And there are programs, that take place. And so that's what Warriors to Citizens is all about, making that transition from a warrior to a citizen and how you can best handle that.
When it comes to veteran suicide, is there anything that you can say that would help a guy maybe thinking in those terms?
Oh, the biggest thing is, I think the biggest thing is that there is, to understand that there is help. I understand that there is help out there, that there is hope. Okay, so, but you're going to have to make that step, towards it. There is help. There's help from the VA. There's help from private industry as well, other organizations, and the biggest thing is to be able to pick up that phone and call somebody. The biggest thing is to be able to call somebody and just say, I need help. It's tough. It's the toughest thing you're going to do, but that's where it starts. And, don't self-medicate yourself, and think that it's going to go away, and woe is me, and you're the only person that's ever had this experience. That is not the case. It is your brother in arms that has it, that you may not know. So that's, the biggest key is just having the the guts to be able to pick up that phone and say, I need help.
We could not justify calling ourselves the Veterans Channel had we not been able to interview the living legend, Rocky Bleier. We applaud Rocky Bleier in all his efforts to come to the aid of our nation's veterans. And with that, we say, OORAH, Rocky Bleier, OORAH.